Something's changed. And if you've been following what's happening with AI music platforms, especially Suno, you've probably felt it, even if you couldn't quite put your finger on it yet.
Because, not that long ago, the entire system looked completely different. It was pretty much defined by a total lack of friction.
I mean, anyone could just open a browser, type in a few words, generate a full song, download it, upload it to streaming platforms, and then just start collecting revenue. There was no barrier. And, critically, no real distinction between someone who is just experimenting and someone who is exploiting the system at a massive scale. And yeah, if that sounds like a problem, it's because it already was.
And look, this wasn't some kind of theory. This was actually happening. People were combining AI music generation with automation to just extract money. And once you really understand that, something becomes crystal clear. The issue was never just AI music. It was always AI music at scale. Because when you remove the cost of creation and you remove the time it takes to produce something, you don't just get more music. You get way too much music. You get this overwhelming flood of content pouring into platforms that were never, ever designed to handle it. And when that happens, discovery collapses, value gets diluted, and maybe most importantly, the bad actors don't need to be good, they just need to be persistent. So now you have this perfect storm, right? You have fraud that's already happening, and you have this unbelievable scale that just keeps making it worse. Which of course leads to the obvious question, what does a platform like Suno do next? I mean, if the problem is unlimited generation and unlimited export, you can't police every single user. It's impossible.
So you don't try to control the people, you control the system. You start to restrict downloads, you limit the output, you remove the ability to easily take music outside of the platform. You don't stop AI music, you just stop the cheap, scalable kind from spreading uncontrollably. And as soon as that happens, everything changes. Because the moment you restrict that kind of scale, the whole ecosystem just starts to shift. The advantage that used to belong to pure prompt-only generation and mass distribution, well, it starts to disappear. And for the very first time, there's a real, meaningful difference between someone just typing in prompts and someone who is actually bringing something into the system, their own voice, their own melodies, their own musical input.
And honestly, that's the part that I think most people haven't fully thought through yet. Because once these platforms can't just rely on sheer volume anymore, they have to start asking a different and much, much harder question. What actually has value? And when that question starts getting asked, the model doesn't just tighten up, it evolves. Because what if the future isn't this binary choice of you don't own anything? What if instead you do own something, and the platform owns it right there with you? Please share, like, and subscribe so this information can reach a wider online audience. And if you'd like to support the channel, there's a super thanks option available in the video menu area.
Watch through to the end to read Edward's final conclusions.
All right, let's get started with this short analysis.
So this whole thing really starts when value replaces volume. When you take away that massive scale, the one thing that kind of made the system neutral, the platform is suddenly forced into a role it never had to play before. It actually has to decide what matters.
See, when you're dealing with unlimited scale, value is basically hidden. Everything just looks the same when there's way too much of it. But the moment you operate under constraint, differences start to emerge. You can see that some outputs have an identifiable human contribution, while others, well, they're just generated artifacts. And once those differences become visible, the platform can't pretend they don't exist anymore. Now, the platform isn't trying to choose what's artistically good. It's choosing what has structural value, what's worth supporting, what's worth sustaining, and what could you potentially defend. And that means creations that are more attributable, more traceable, and ultimately more defensible. And once that hierarchy of value starts to form, the system inevitably begins to split apart. And this isn't some new policy they're just going to announce one day, it's a structural consequence. And a framework proposed by Edward Venetayad really helps explain how platforms like Suno are forced to evolve under this kind of pressure.
And what his framework shows is that two very different types of creators start to emerge. On one side, you have the prompt-only user. Their work has super low attribution, it's infinitely replaceable, and they're completely dependent on the platform. But on the other side, you have the contributor. This is someone who brings in their own vocals, their own melodies, or other real inputs. Their work is anchored by a verifiable contribution.
And this is the crucial point right here. This split doesn't happen out of preference. It happens out of necessity. A platform that's trying to reduce its own risk and retain some kind of value simply cannot treat these two groups the same way. And once that necessity takes hold, the next step isn't just about identifying the difference. It's about deciding how that difference gets rewarded.
All right, so the very first thing we have to get our heads around
and this is all based on this great analysis from Edward Vinatea, is that the old rules, they're just out the window. We're moving way past a simple yes or no when it comes to who owns what.
And this really lays it out perfectly. The old way was just totally binary. Either you own the whole thing or you didn't. Simple. But the new way, ownership is now conditional, and that's the key word. It all depends on what you, the human, brought to the table versus what the AI platform itself contributed. You gotta think of it more like a spectrum now, not just an on-off switch.
Okay, so to really get how this whole conditional ownership thing works in practice, let's walk through 3 super common scenarios. This is where all that theory, well, this is where it gets real. Let's kick things off with a situation that a ton of creators are probably already familiar with. Let's say you've got a fantastic voice, but you need the music, you need the lyrics, the whole shebang. So you turn to an AI platform to just generate all of that stuff for you. And as you can see here, the breakdown of who did what is pretty clear-cut. The platform, it's handling the heavy lifting, the actual composition and the lyrics. That's the core of the song. Meanwhile, the human is just providing the performance. You know, it's kind of like being a session singer who comes in to perform a song that someone else already wrote. Now here's where it gets serious. The consequence of this split is huge. The platform walks away with 50% of the mechanicals and 50% of the publishing rights. And what that really means is that you, the human performer, have zero control over the actual song itself. The platform can legally take that exact same composition and get someone else to sing it. They can license it for a movie, put it in a commercial, anything they want, all without ever asking your permission. That's a big deal.
Okay, on to scenario 2. Here, the roles are a little different this time around. So what happens if you write the music? You know, you come up with a great chord progression or a killer melody, but you need the AI to handle the lyrics and maybe even the vocal performance.
So in this case, the human's contribution feels way more substantial, right? I mean, you're providing the actual musical composition. But, and this is a big but, the platform is still contributing a core copyrightable piece of the puzzle, the lyrics.
And believe it or not, this shows a really key principle. The result? It's exactly the same as the first scenario, a 50-50 split on publishing. So why is that? It's because those platform-generated lyrics act as an anchor, locking the platform into ownership. It turns out this isn't about who started the song or who did the most work even, it's about who owns the foundational creative building blocks of the final track.
So you're probably wondering, is there any way for the human to keep full creative control? And the answer is yes. But you have to be very specific in your approach. This is the third scenario, full human input. It's what Vinatea calls the perfect hybrid case. In this scenario, the human writes everything, the music and the lyrics. The AI platform is used just as a tool, and that's the key difference. Maybe you use it to generate a vocal performance for the lyrics you already wrote, or maybe it helps you arrange a composition you already created. It's just providing assistance. It's not adding any of its own core creative ideas.
And look at this, the outcome is completely different. The platform still gets its 50% of the mechanicals, that's the money from the specific recording, but it gets 0 publishing rights. That means the human keeps 100% of the control over the song itself, simply because they created 100% of the actual composition. That right there is the defining threshold. It's the bright line.
So when you look at all 3 of these scenarios together, a really clear pattern starts to emerge. It all basically boils down to one simple but incredibly powerful rule that governs this whole system.
And here it is. The moment the platform contributes anything creative, it inserts itself into ownership. Not partially, not symbolically, but contractually. Just let that sink in for a second. Any creative input from the AI, we're talking a single lyric, a short melody, even just a chord progression. It's not just a friendly suggestion. No way. It's a contractual stake. It's a claim to own part of the thing you're making.
Okay, so this is where we have to look past the numbers on the page. That 50-50 split we keep talking about, it might sound like a simple way to share the cash, but what it's really doing is, well, it's a lot more important than that.
Because what it looks like is just a 50% split, but what it actually is a control structure. So from now on, when you see that 50% number, don't just think about dollars and cents. You need to think about control. Because what's really being built is a framework for who calls the shots for the entire life of that song. And this is what we mean by control.
Publishing rights, they're basically the keys to the kingdom. They determine who gets to license the song for a movie, who has to approve if another artist wants to sample it, and who gets to cash in on it commercially down the road. When you share publishing rights, you are sharing all of that decision-making power.
So by now, you're probably thinking, okay, scenario 3, that's the goal, full human input. But here's the thing, for the vast majority of people who are actually using these tools, that's just not going to be the reality. The system itself is kind of designed for a different default outcome. I mean, let's be real, most users are naturally going to lean on the platform for some creative help, right? Whether it's for lyrics or song structure or just getting a track over the finish line. And the moment they do that, they are, by default, operating in scenario 1 or 2. They're working in a system where ownership is already partially assigned from the very first line the AI generates. So once you really understand this underlying structure, this mechanic of how it all works, the final conclusion from Edward Venetea's analysis becomes totally clear. And frankly, it's unavoidable. The old model, the one where anybody could just generate something, export the file, and claim 100% ownership, that's gone. That freewheeling early era of AI generation is officially over. These systems are now being built from the ground up with a contractual framework for ownership that's tied directly to every single creative contribution. Which, of course, leads us to the next big question. What happens when that old model finally and completely breaks? Now that ownership is mechanically, contractually baked right into the tool itself, what is the future of creativity, compensation, and yes, control? What does it actually look like?
And this is really the natural endpoint of that logic. You end up with a new co-publishing model. The platform is no longer just a tool or a generator, it becomes a direct stakeholder in the music it helps create.
And for a creator, this changes everything. This image here really captures that moment of realization. Ownership is no longer something that's just granted or denied to you. It becomes something that is conditionally enforced. You might feel like you can operate freely, right up until the moment it really matters.
So what you end up with is this new balance of trade-offs. The creator, on one hand, gets access to these unbelievably powerful generation tools. But what do they give up? Full control and absolute ownership. And the platform, in turn, gets a long-term stake in any successful music and gets to take on a selective responsibility for the content it actually considers valuable.
Now, it is absolutely critical to be clear here. Edward Venetea is not saying that this exact model is definitely going to be implemented by Suno. What's being presented here is a framework. It's a way to understand the direction that systems like this are being pushed. It is not a claim about a finalized outcome. The exact structure and the percentages could all change.
But the direction of travel is becoming much harder to ignore. As part of ongoing developments, like the new agreements with major labels, these platforms are expected to move toward licensed models, restricting downloads and exports. This confirms something critical. The era of unlimited generation and unrestricted export is already coming to an end. And once that foundation changes, everything downstream has to adjust: ownership, attribution, monetization, and control.
So the question is no longer, will the system change? The real question is, what will it change into? And the model proposed here by Edward Venetea is one very possible answer to that question. Not because it's guaranteed, but because it follows the pure logic of the pressures that are now shaping this industry. Because once platforms can no longer just rely on volume, they have no choice but to start valuing contribution. And once contribution becomes the metric, ownership can no longer be assumed. It has to be defined, and it has to be shared. And one way or another, it has to be enforced.
Okay, all that being said, if you found this helpful, like and share to help it reach more people. You can also support the channel with super thanks in the video menu. See ya in the next one.
You've